for start, can you tell us your name, your position, and your role? And where do you work, of course?
Yeah, I'm Etienne Beaulieu. I'm Director of User Experience at Panache Digital Games for 8 years now.
Okay, so you're a User Experience Director. Can you please elaborate more on your role? What does that exactly mean?
So usually people would say UI or UX or one or the other. I worked on this title with the people of Director of User Experience, trying to have an even broader overview of how players interact with the game, how they interface literally with the game, and what their emotions and experience are while playing the game. So it gets from the main menu, the icons, and it goes all the way to how you interact with the game, like flows of interaction, trying to help on 3Cs and controls. So everything that's surrounding humans is really interesting to me, so that's what I do. Okay,
you're a speaker now on Reboot Develop 2023. Can you tell us more about your topic and what did you talk about?
I'm giving a talk with Nicolas Quentin, who is the art director at Panache, and our talk is about art direction. Because, as I said, I do a lot of different things, and art direction is one of them too, specifically about the UI. So our talk is about how we brought the AAA experience to a smaller independent studio. So when we did Ancestors: The Humankind Odyssey, it was the first Panache game. That's what the talk is about, is how we came up with this game and how we developed the art direction. Sort of together too, because it's like two aspects of it. Nick does more of the worlds and the characters, and I do more of the interface and the effects and stuff like that. So we started very small. It was like 7 or 8 people, and now we're like 50 people. So it was also that kind of experience. How do you start small, and how do you build a game that wants to be big? And that's where the triple I comes from, which is a term that's not really used. But we try to embrace it because it's a way of thinking to try to have an independent game, but have big ambitions. And that comes with a specific way of working. And that's what we're trying to show in our talk, is all throughout pre-production, conception, all the way to post-release, how we did it and what were the different steps, and hoping that it could inspire someone or help them on their work.
Okay, that's cool. You were a part of the core development team for Thief.
Yes.
Can you tell us what is your opinion on how did those stealth mechanics in Thief influence the later games who use stealth mechanics?
Yeah, stealth is really interesting. Like, I've always been a fan of stealth games. Like from maybe the first Metal Gear was the first one that I really liked. So when I got approached to work on Thief, I thought it was a really interesting challenge, coming from a very respected game too. And there was some kind of view of trying to renew it for a broader audience, because as much as Thief is well loved, it didn't sell very well. So there was sort of this struggle throughout. So we really tried to make it a little bit more accessible, a little bit more let's say cinematic a little bit. So we tried to use the same core ideas that the first one, like the light gauge, being in the shadows and being in the light, was very important and interesting, and that's what we spent the most time working on, was like, if you're in the shadows, you have to feel like you're hidden, and without trying to rely too much on UI and different icons. And that's a big part of my work too, is trying to use the user interface as more than icons, as like the core experience of it. And that's what I tried to push, and that's something that I think is continued today. People try to use different ways of featuring stealth mechanics. I remember one of the Tomb Raider games, I think, where you just approached a cover and then you just covered automatically without having to press on a button. Just trying to make things a little smoother to focus on the real experience, which is hiding from people and not being seen.
Yeah, experience is really important.
Yeah, experience is important.
You mentioned that the game didn't sell that well. What do you think that is? Do you maybe have a clue?
I don't really know. I mean, I know the first ones didn't sell so well because of the, I don't know, maybe it was the time, maybe it was, and it was very respected. I'm sure it sold a lot over the years. The one that we made, there was flaws. There were like good parts and parts that were a little bit more controversial, let's say. I think I'm really proud of what we did, and I'm really proud of the work that I've done. And we had a great team, and we did a really good job. But when you work on these huge games,
did you think maybe because it was a new kind of mechanic that people were still not yet, or I don't know, not, I want to say okay with it, but it was new to them, so maybe they didn't like that kind of way, or?
I don't really know.
No?
I don't really know.
Well, you said that you are interested and you like working with people. So can you tell us more? You were also in charge of, for TIFF, you were also in charge of making a special communication pipelines for the team. So can you tell us more about how did that work for, and how to build such a successful team?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because that's the hardest part of anything. Because making a game by yourself would probably be the best thing ever, because you only have you. If you have all the skills, all the talent, all the money, that would be the best. But you have to work in a team all the time. And the bigger your ambitions, the bigger the team gets, and the harder it is to build communication, because building a game is different people with different backgrounds. You have programmers that are very logical, and then you have artists that are very creative, and you have to make sure that everyone fits together. So one of the things that I tried to push on TIFF was showing people from the team what everyone's working on. So every week I used to send a big email with, this is the progress of the UI team this week. Here's what we worked on, here's what we're gonna work on, here are some images. And just to have a visibility, because sometimes it's hard to, you're so focused on what you're doing that it's hard to see like everything, what everyone else is doing. And the bigger the project too, the harder it is to get everyone in the same room and spend 2 hours to look at the game. That's something that we're doing now at Panache. Is every Friday afternoon we get into our media room, and Patrice, our creative director, he just plays the game and we just talk about it. We have a beer, we just like have a good time playing a game, because that's what you do when you play a game. You're at home, you have a good time, and it's not being in a meeting room, you know, with like other people trying to focus. It's just enjoying yourself, and that's the only way that you can really appreciate this game. So trying to create these moments of communication that are positive and that are enjoyable is really important.
So communication is the key.
Yeah, always.
But also the negatives, probably, right? Yeah. You also need to talk about the negatives with your colleagues. And
yes.
So
yeah, you have to. It's always trying to be like, it's not about ego. It's not about, if your work is bad, it's not because of you. It's not it's not a reflection of who you are. It's just, oh, it didn't turn out. And sometimes you even need to see failures. You need to prove that this does not work. And you need to see it, you need to play it, be like, oh, that wasn't it, good, let's move on. And that's really important to learn as you're building, because sometimes people get really hurt. They're like, oh no, I did a bad job. No, it's fine, we move on, let's go.
Exactly. That's really important, yeah. Thank you. After that you worked as a UI designer for Star Citizen.
Yes.
That was 2014 to 2015.
Exactly.
So basically when it started,
yeah.
Right? So what is your take on the game from that point and what it became today? Did you see it back then to become what it is now, or did you see something else?
That's really interesting. Star Citizen is a really fascinating project, because it's been like you said, it's been 10 years since it started and it's not released yet, but it sort of is, right? You can play it today and there's plenty of stuff to do, but you can obviously tell that they're still working on it. So when I got on Star Citizen, I was working in Montreal at a company called Behavior, and it was right after their Kickstarter where they like exploded and they got so much money and they're like, finally we can do it. So they hired a few companies, experienced companies here and there to work on this. And so we got hired at Behavior to help sort of start building the basis for the game. And it's really interesting because I was part of all these conversations about what the game will be in the future, and it is what it is today. The vision has always been there. Chris Roberts was very inspiring. He really knows what he wants to do. It's his game and he has a vision. And everyone's working in that direction. And it shows today. I hope the best for them. I hope they manage to really finish what they want to do and continue. They're still making money today, right? They're still making more and more money every year.
We, the fans, are also waiting for that moment. Yeah, definitely.
They had the best fans. People at the beginning, they were running out of ways to help the project. They wanted to give more money because they wanted to see it happen. And they bought everything. They were trying to see it happen. And it's really fun to work on a project, especially like that, where you feel like there's fans, but like from day one, because usually you work for years without everyone knowing what you're working on, and then you start showing here and there, but the game's already started, right? So this sort of concept of showing the development, very transparent development, I think they really pushed that to the forefront of showing every week they had a 2-hour show on YouTube where they talked about it. And that was back in 2012 when they had nothing, there was no game. And it's so interesting.
Just an idea, right?
Just an idea. They came up with like stuff that was easy to talk about, like lore, like building the worlds, building the different races of aliens and everything. And concepts and all the beginning part of the game that usually is really, really underground. This time was all out in the open. So I worked specifically on something called the Mobiglass, which was the sort of the personal assistant, which was like your watch, like a huge 3D screen. So I worked a lot on that, and what is the interface of that world? That was really interesting work, trying to figure out what that world uses as an interface. So we worked on everything, all the different aspects, and it was really fascinating because sometimes the good part of a project is also coming up with the really ideas. So being in a room and being like, hey, we'll do this and this and this, and mock-upping them and being like, yeah, really exciting, we'll do that. And there's a lot of ideas that I did years ago that I see pop up today in the game, and I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I keep seeing these little things here and there that are still like coming up from these meetings. So it's on the right track. It's really cool.
Yeah, that probably gives you goosebumps, right, from back in the days.
Yeah, it's always fun. So I keep continuing to look at what their game is and what they're doing. It's really fun.
Regarding interface, you also worked on an interface for Need for Speed Nitro,
yes,
for the Wii console, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell us more on how different is making the user interface, or is it any different at all, for making a user interface for a Wii console and for a PC? Yeah. Or some other console as the PlayStation or...
Yeah, well, the thing with the PC and the Wii is very cursor driven. So that's a big difference. Usually console games, it's very gamepad. So that is a big difference. So I started my gaming career doing a lot of Wii games. And it's very different because Wii is a small... Back then we had to be like small CRT screens. So the buttons need to be huge. It was like, if you have 4 buttons on your screen, it was all 4 squares. So there was a lot of work of trying to make it big and bold and easy to use because it's for kids. So the Wii was the first console that really like everyone used it, like the kids, the grandma playing bowling, right? So they have to be able to use it. And Nitro was interesting because they tried to come up with the idea of just like tilting it and doing drifts and everything. It was a fun project. It was really, it was a time where there was, the Wii was selling so much that they were throwing so much money at making all these different kinds of games. So there was a nice like freeness to making these weird fun games and using these cool licenses like Need for Speed, and like make a Need for Speed for the Wii. And so we try to use what they're doing, but trying to bring in a little bit of Nintendo in it at the same time. So yeah, that was fun.
Very nice. For the end, can you tell us, maybe you have some message for the young and upcoming talent on how to become such a successful and have such a broad and good resume in the game dev industry? Do you have maybe something for the young people?
That's a really interesting question because there's so many different variations that you can... I think the main thing is make games. It sounds dumb, but it sounds so simple, but make a game. Like what these people behind us are doing, you have to build a game, because you've never made a game until you've finished a game. So just the best thing to do is sometimes just make a match 3 game, make a Pong game, make whatever simple game that you want to make, but finish it, make it, and understand what comes as the whole process of making the game. And once you live that loop, then you can start finding your touch, your style, your specialization. Don't go like thinking that you want to make like, I want to make, I don't know, 3D characters and I'm only going to do that. Maybe that once you get started, maybe that's not exactly what you want to do. So start wide, start trying things. And if you want to be a designer, don't just write things on paper. Just like try to come up with games. There's so many tools now that makes it easy for people to make a game. There's all these platforms too. I've heard somebody that got hired because they made a game on Dream, like a PlayStation game where you can make games. And somebody got hired because they showed the game that they made on that. It's not about the tools, it's not about the anything, it's about the mind behind it. So just make games. It sounds very easy, but that's the best key.
Yes. Simple and strong message for the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.